They asked me once, years after it was all over, how we did it. How did the United States Navy go from the burning wreckage of Pearl Harbor to accepting Japan's surrender on the deck of the USS Missouri in less than 4 years? The truth is more complex than most people want to hear, yet simpler than they might imagine. It wasn't just about superior American courage. The Japanese were as brave as any warriors who ever lived. It wasn't about our industrial might alone, though that certainly mattered. It wasn't even about individual genius or brilliant strategy, though we had our share of both. The answer, when you strip away everything else, comes down to one fundamental truth. We learned faster than they could adapt. But you can't understand the victory without understanding the depth of the defeat that preceded it. December 7th, 1941, The Reckoning. I wasn't at Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. I was in Washington, serving as Chief of the Bureau of Navigation. But 10 days later, on December 17th, I stood on the deck of a submarine in Pearl Harbor, looking out at the devastation, preparing to take command of the Pacific Fleet. The scene was apocalyptic. The Arizona was still burning. She'd been burning for 10 days. The Oklahoma had capsized, her hull jutting out of the water like the corpse of some great beast. The California, the West Virginia, the Nevada, all sunk or beached. Oil slicked the harbor, and the smell of fuel and death hung in the air. But it wasn't the physical damage that shocked me most. Ships can be raised, repaired, or replaced. It was the psychological blow. The assumption of invulnerability had been shattered. Americans understood, finally, that we were in a real war and that we were losing. The Japanese attack had been nearly perfect in execution. They had achieved complete surprise despite numerous warning signs. Their torpedo bombers came in low over the water, their high-level bombers struck with devastating accuracy, their fighters strafed anything that moved. In less than 2 hours, they'd crippled the Pacific Fleet's battle line and destroyed nearly 200 aircraft. But Pearl Harbor was just the beginning of our education. The deluge, learning through blood. The 5 months following Pearl Harbor were the darkest period of American military history. Wake Island fell on December 23rd. Guam fell. The Philippines came under assault. Douglas MacArthur's forces were trapped on Bataan Peninsula, short of everything: food, medicine, ammunition, hope. We evacuated MacArthur on March 11, 1942, while leaving 78,000 American and Filipino troops to surrender to a brutal captivity. Hong Kong fell to the Japanese. Singapore, the great British fortress, supposedly impregnable, surrendered in February with 80,000 troops. The Japanese invaded Burma, Malaya, the Dutch East Indies. Everywhere, Allied forces were in retreat. But it was the naval battles that taught us our most painful lessons. The Battle of the Java Sea on February 27, 1942, was a disaster. A scratch force of American, British, Dutch, and Australian ships tried to stop a Japanese invasion convoy. They were outmaneuvered, outfought, and decimated. We lost 5 cruisers and several destroyers without significantly damaging the invasion force. What we learned from Java Sea was humbling. Japanese torpedoes worked, ours often didn't. Their night fighting tactics were superb, ours were practically non-existent. Their gunnery was accurate, ours was erratic. They operated with coordination and tactical sophistication. We were still learning how to fight as a unified force. Then came the Battle of Savo Island on August 9, 1942, and that was even worse. We'd just landed Marines on Guadalcanal, our first offensive operation of the war. A Japanese force came down under cover of darkness to attack our transports. In 32 minutes of savage combat, we lost 4 heavy cruisers. Over 1,000 sailors died. The Japanese force retired with minor damage. I read the after-action reports from Savo Island with a sick feeling. We had been asleep at the switch. Our radar had detected the approaching force, but the information wasn't processed or communicated effectively. Our ships were silhouetted against fires on Guadalcanal, making perfect targets. Our gunnery was ineffective because we couldn't see in the dark. The Japanese, meanwhile, demonstrated night-fighting capabilities that seemed almost supernatural. Their torpedoes, the Type 93, Long Lance, were oxygen-fueled weapons that could strike from incredible distances. Their crews had trained for night combat for years. Ours hadn't. This is what I mean when I say we were green. We weren't just inexperienced. We were fundamentally unprepared for the kind of war we were fighting. The learning begins. But here's where the American character revealed itself. After each disaster, after each defeat, we didn't make excuses. We didn't blame circumstances or bad luck. We looked hard at what went wrong and figured out how to fix it. After Savo Island, we completely revamped our night-fighting doctrine. We studied Japanese tactics from every scrap of intelligence we could gather. We trained our crews relentlessly in radar operation. We developed new communication procedures. We instituted a culture of aggressive patrolling and constant vigilance. The torpedo problem was emblematic. Our Mark 14 torpedo had 3 major defects. It ran too deep, its magnetic detonator often failed, and its contact detonator often failed on impact. We were sending submarine crews into combat with weapons that worked properly maybe half the time. The Bureau of Ordnance insisted the torpedoes were fine, but our submarine commanders knew better. They conducted their own tests, gathered evidence, and proved the torpedoes were defective. It took until September 1943 to fully fix the problems, but once we did, American submarines became the most effective commerce raiders in history. This pattern repeated across every aspect of naval warfare. Radar reliability problems, we improved training and maintenance. Communication problems, new procedures and equipment. Damage control deficiencies, we studied what worked and created our own superior system. The learning wasn't just technical, it was cultural. We broke the Japanese Naval Code, JN-25, but that was just the beginning. We built an entire intelligence infrastructure. Combat intelligence units were established across the Pacific. We didn't just decrypt messages, we analyzed patterns, built databases of ship movements, and created comprehensive order of battle assessments. Commander Joseph Roche and his team at Station Hypo in Pearl Harbor became legendary. Working in a windowless basement, often in bathrobes because the ventilation was poor, they pieced together intelligence that would change the course of the war. Midway. The first exam. By May 1942, we'd been learning for 5 months. We were about to take our first major test. The Japanese were planning a massive operation to capture Midway Island and draw out the American carrier fleet for a decisive battle. Admiral Yamamoto assembled nearly every major combat ship in the Imperial Navy, 4 fleet carriers, 2 light carriers, 11 battleships, dozens of cruisers and destroyers. We had 3 carriers, the Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown. The Yorktown had been badly damaged at the Battle of the Coral Sea just weeks earlier and was supposed to need months of repair. Our shipyard workers in Pearl Harbor fixed her in 72 hours, working around the clock. But our real advantage was intelligence. Roche's team had broken enough of JN-25 to give us a clear picture of Japanese intentions. We knew they were coming to Midway. We knew approximately when. We knew they'd have 4 carriers. This intelligence advantage was the first fruit of our learning. 5 months earlier, we had no such capability. I positioned our carriers northeast of Midway, where they could ambush the Japanese strike force. The Japanese had no idea we were there. The battle itself was a near-run thing. Our initial torpedo bomber attacks were slaughtered. We lost 35 of 41 Devastators without scoring a single hit. But those torpedo bombers pulled the Japanese fighters down to wave-top level. Then our dive bombers arrived. In 5 minutes, 3 Japanese carriers, the Akagi, Kaga, and Tsuryu, were mortally wounded. A 4th carrier, the Hiryu, launched a strike that crippled the Yorktown. But American dive bombers found the Hiryu that afternoon and destroyed it too. 4 Japanese fleet carriers sunk, their most experienced pilots killed, their aura of invincibility shattered. But I want to be clear about what Midway represented. It wasn't just a victory. It was proof that we'd learned enough in 5 months to beat the Japanese at their own game. Our intelligence had been superior. Our positioning had been superior. Our damage control had saved